Okay. We're live.
Yeah, and we're live.
We're
yeah,
live.
We're here.
And in your face.
You know, I just want to thanks for I don't want to say tuning in, but I should say tuning in because you know, the rebroadcast on New Visions Radio Network. But thanks for joining us tonight. And you know, a bit of bad news, by the way. I was never really a huge fan, but obviously you guys have heard the fact that Meatloaf passed away.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's huge for the music industry, I guess, and his acting career. By the way, I want to really thank and welcome Reeves Cooke to the show. A very first time on the show. Thanks for coming on, Reeves.
You're welcome. It's certainly going to be an experience, I'm sure.
Yes. And like I was saying,
We try.
You know, yeah, try. And Q, that you know, our mutual friend Gareth, obviously, he kept saying you got to have Reeves on, you got to have him on, especially when you talk about the paranormal as much as you guys and your interest and everything else. And so it's great to finally have you on. So awesome. And I know it's a little earlier there than we usually ask you to come on. So
yes, it is.
And you know, a special broadcast for us here on Friday evening. We used to do the odd Friday night show, but I mean, it was usually 9 o'clock, right, Alex? Something like that.
Yeah, usually around the same time.
Yeah, something like that. So maybe Reeves, just give a little bit a background to the viewers and people who may not know who Reeves Cooke is.
Well, I think most people that may have some inkling as to who I am would be from the Mindset Network and, of course, Paratalk, which we'll come into that a little bit later.
Mm-hmm.
But I have kind of been in the scene and in the network for maybe since that's when I kind of got sort of properly onto the internet and started to discover things and stuff. So I think that for me, sort of you know, who I am and where I come from it's mainly with, you know, the advent of Nervous Teeth, and then that evolving into the mindset, and obviously going from there is kind of gave a lot of opportunities to not just me, but obviously there was other people as well that were involved. Without going over, you know, ground that we've gone over before, I think that to give listeners an idea of how I came onto the scene with Gareth and stuff is I kind of met Gareth back in, it must have been 1999. I think we first exchanged emails, and that was when he was doing the Nervous Teeth episodes with Rod Rodriguez, who is also no longer with us.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I kind of, you know, I kind of helped out a little bit there and did some graphic work for them and stuff like that. And it kind of escalated by me becoming a regular sort of listener and coming into the chat room and just talking about, as you do, you know, you have an internet connection, and back then it's like you can sit at your keyboard and find out within reason anything you want about conspiracies and stuff. And I was kind of really into it back then. I was reading everything, you know, literally everything. And kind of Gareth picked up on this, and he's like, you know, do you want to get involved with the show in some way? And I'm like, well, you know, okay, but I don't want to be a you know, I'm not a broadcaster. I had no interest in anything like that back then. But he knew I had an interest in the paranormal and UFOs, and we would talk and exchange messages and emails. And of course, as time went on, the sad passing of Rod and Mindset kind of closed the doors. He closed the doors on it for a couple of years because it was a bit, you know, things were just a bit much. And he said to me later on, he said, have you got any ideas for shows? I'm thinking about starting up Mindset again, a new version. And I said, well, we've always wanted to do a paranormal show. and he said, well, have you got any ideas? Send me some ideas and we'll talk about it. Because the thing with Gareth is he's very how can I put this? He's very quick. He's very direct. If he likes something, if he likes an idea, he'll go, I'll go with that. Let's do it. But if he doesn't like it, he'll just say, no, it's garbage. Bin it, start again.
Yeah.
So I kind of already had this plan of what I wanted to do, but it had to really fit in with what he wanted to do as well. Because Paratalk wasn't any one person's thing. It wasn't Gareth's thing, and it wasn't my thing. It was something we both wanted to do, and we wanted to make a show that was equally. We had sort of an equal input to start with. It did transpire later on that, I was sort of doing the episodes and putting the episodes together and putting the ideas together and then sending it to him, and he would deal with all the back end and make sure that the shows went up. And because we had to find our common ground where what we could do, because obviously it's really difficult doing a show when you're 8 hours, you're 8 hours apart, and it is difficult doing that because you've got to be in the, as you well know, you do this streaming thing, and you do radio and stuff, and you've got to be in the right mindset to do it. There's no point doing an episode. I can sit down and go, I'm going to do an episode of Paratalk, and I'm just like, but I'm not in the mood. And then tell my story or write my script, and it's complete rubbish. And when I do something, it's got to be enjoyable, for me, because then obviously that comes across. So yeah, I think that that's how we kind of met, and that's how I came onto the scene. I've got involved with the mindset as well, doing that, but Paratalk was where I really enjoyed doing that sort of stuff. And obviously with the sad passing of Gareth, and he's no longer around, it's when I decided that we had lots of ideas for Paratalk. We talked, we had this amazing conversation about 3 or 4 months before he died, and he said, what do you want to do with Paratalk? What's your ideas? And I said, well, we could do this, and we could have guests on, and we could sort of maybe bring in some other people and get their opinions and get other YouTubers, and he's like, well, I like those ideas. Let's do something. And we recorded a bunch of episodes that when it would never be published, because I don't really keep notes and stuff. I'll put an episode together. Once it's done, I move on to the next one. And so those things they are going to happen because I've kept Paratalk going. So they are going to happen in some way, but maybe not. They won't manifest in the way that kind of Gareth and I envisioned us doing it on the original, what I call the original Paratalk. So, obviously when Gareth went, I'm kind of scratching my head and I'm thinking, what do I do? Do I continue Paratalk? Or do I just kind of throw the towel in and just, think, well, it was fun. But then I thought, well, you've got a lot of people that listen to the show. And at one point, Paratalk was the most popular episode going out regularly on the whole, out of all the Mindset episodes, even the Mindset podcast. It was more popular than that. And it was like, well, people like it. People are downloading it and they're listening to it. So I wanted to keep it going, but I didn't want to sort of try and, or Gareth's not here anymore, but I'll bring someone else in and then we'll just carry on as before. Because you can't really do that. I knew Gareth for nearly 21 years. And it took us 15 years to actually meet in person. But we used to talk every single day on Messenger and on, we would talk about stuff and just goof around, and it's kind of like you build up a relationship with anyone, if you're talking to them every day, you build up this kind of, where you can kind of know where, we had an interest as well with, old horror films and retro 80s stuff. He knows that I was stuck in the past, and I would always bring up stuff that, oh my God, how do you remember this stuff? So it's like, so kind of that's where I came from. and not only did we sort of have a great friendship, but Paratalk was born from it was born from the ashes of the first mindset, and it was kind of came into its own from the version 2.0 of mindset. So yeah, to answer your question, which took 10 minutes,
That's fine.
yeah, that's where I came from. Yeah. Sorry.
Well, that's interesting because I mean, me personally, I enjoyed hearing the background. I want to know, where this was born, what it took to like say, hey, look, I love this show. These guys really click, and it's not like I mean, sure, there are people that click automatically, but I mean, sometimes it takes quite a long time for people to click and go, hey, look at this. This really goes.
Yeah, Stephen, I still don't click.
Yeah,
I think that when you do anything like this, you have to be reasonably like-minded, and you have to be on the same page. But on the flip side of it, it's always good if you kind of disagree on a few aspects, so that you have that little bit of, I'll agree with you because you disagree. It's that kind of that thing. It's that dynamic, and I do miss that at the moment. I do miss the whole dynamic, and one of the great things with keeping Paratalk going is that in some ways that dynamic will come back at some points in the episodes, because I want to bring in I plan to bring in a few new people who can contribute to the show. It might not be a regular thing. It might be once or twice a month, but I want to bring in other people to sort of recapture the dynamic, not in the same way that Gareth and I had, because we had this kind of comedy aspect to what we talked about as well, where I could suddenly just talk about something and he'd know what I was on about. Could it be Children of the Stones or whatever? And if you're in with the joke, you get the joke, and if you're not, you just think we're talking a lot of old nonsense. But the thing was that I wanted to bring that back in just some little way, just so that those people that enjoyed that, they were able to experience that again. But I've had emails from people saying, hey, are you going to have any guests on the show? It would be a good idea if you did. But also people saying to me, I really like the direction you've gone in. I like that you pick a story and it's just you, the narration, and the story, and that's it. There's no extra stuff. It's just, here it is. Chill out, put your headphones on, and have a listen. But I'm trying to cater. It's like anything. You kind of put everything on the table and you think, right, what I know what works, but it's a complete mess. But I kind of need to find out where I'm going. How often can I do this? How often can I put these shows out? I really want Paratalk to grow, and I really want to get it back sort of up to where it was, 2 years ago. But I also want to move it on to the next kind of, the next run of the ladder, where you are thinking, well, okay, now this is actually in a position where I can start to, there's this word that everyone hates, and I'm sure you've heard of it. It's called monetarization.
Yes.
So put it this way. It would be nice if Paratalk was able to earn money, right?
Yeah.
But I don't want I don't want to say to people, oh, I've got a great show, you're really enjoying it, but now I want some money from you.
Yeah.
I don't want to do that. I don't want to. I want anyone that wants to listen to the show can download it and listen to it. And I don't want to put a paywall halfway through, so they go, well, I'm really enjoying this episode, but hang on a minute, now I've got to pay $5. I don't want that. So the only thing that's left for me is either sponsorship or advertising, putting it, put it on YouTube or whatever. So there are those options, that I am considering, but I don't ever want to. Gareth and I had this, we had this kind of agreement where if we were going to do a show, even if it was monetized, it would still have to be free. You couldn't just say, oh, it's all now. We had a pay when we. If you understand to me, please, that do you know how difficult it was to make Gareth put up a Patreon? He just did not want to do it.
I know. You were saying
you would say to him, I'd say to him, look, mate, we've got to we got to go to the next level here. And, there are people out there that want to support the show because, I mean, he had his own server that cost a lot of money. And every year it was hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of dollars he was paying out for data transfer. It was all, and he had all the best stuff. It was none of this sort of cheapo hosting. It was all proper stuff. And it was costing money and he was paying it. And it's like, the show has got to sort of earn its keep a little bit. So, I mean, we put a Patreon up and we were kind of, we went onto YouTube and we were kind of doing the whole YouTube thing. And it was, it was growing and people were joining and we were doing it in a way that no one felt like they had to spend any money. It was like, you don't have to spend any money if you don't want to. And I always look at the point where, as I just said, a lot of people don't care. They're like, oh, I'll chuck you a few dollars a month. That's no big deal to me. But I care that they're happy with what they've got and they don't feel that they're being taken advantage of. Because, you got to kind of, it's like, look, it's a hobby or it's a business, And the way I look at it is that if you want to, there are most probably don't want to offend people, but I'm just the way I look at it is that if you want to grow something and move it on, you must look at it like a business. Mm-hmm. You have to think, right, how can I offer a quality product to people that want to, that want to download it, want to listen to it, want to support the show, but at the same time, how can I have it so that there are people out there that are on really tight budgets, and they really enjoy the show. I want to make it free to them. So we had this kind of understanding where it has to be available to everyone. And that was the same with Mindset and everything that we did. And it's kind of still the same now. I think that 2022, all this kind of pandemic stuff has made me kind of think about, and also you get to the point where your age and life experience, you suddenly wake up one day and you realize that all that stuff you've done in your life it makes you realize that I need to do something for me that means something, and I need to do something that I enjoy, and it's kind of, if I want to go and stand in a stinky old allegedly haunted house all night and absolutely experience nothing, I want to be able to do that. But if that makes me happy and it makes other people happy, then great. You've kind of achieved what you want to achieve. But you kind of get to an age where you think, I want to start doing stuff that I'm enjoying, and you look at stuff like Paratalk, and you think, it needs to sort of keep going. It needs to keep moving. And I think that it's early days at the moment. Well, I mean, what am I? Fourth episode or third episode? There's other episodes in the bag.
But those episodes have substance. That's what I love about it. Even though there's the length is they're not lengthy, but it doesn't matter. The subject matter is amazing. You have really done a great job. Explaining, well, not explaining, but, sort of giving people what they need to know about the situation that you're talking about with a lot of the stories, like the history and whatever else that you're dealing with the episodes. And that's, I think that's what people love about it.
One of the things that amazes me about the paranormal is you can go to a house, and I've been to haunted locations that, manor houses, castles. I remember, I'm going on a tangent again. I'm good at this. It's another story. I remember going on a school trip, and this was, I must have been 12 or 13. It was before I went to sort of big school. I was still nearly, well, I was a teen, early teens, and we went on this trip, and it was like a castle keep kind of manor house kind of place. And I remember going in this place, and outside it was a lovely day. It wasn't like grim or anything like that. It was a nice day, school trip, school trips are school trips. And we go in this house, and for immediately it was like this repressive kind of angry atmosphere. And I said to my mate, it feels weird in here. And he was like, well, it's an old house, isn't it? But I was like, no, it just feels weird. Now I just don't. I'm not Derek Acora. I'm not psychic. Okay.
Come on, you're supposed to say what I say all the time. I'm not. I'm as psychic dumb as they come.
Yeah, I'm not. Okay. I think everyone is, to a certain degree. I think we're all sensitive to the environment around us, and I think a lot of that is to do with going back to the olden days when big tigers would chase us. But I do think that when you do go in these buildings and there's hundreds and hundreds of years of history where people have lived in them and things have gone on, people have been murdered, people have been angry. Get back in those days, if they didn't like you, they chuck you down a hole in the front room and then carry on having their dinner. You go down the oubliette, and you stay there and that's it. You rot. And that kind of, I think that in some way affects the building and the atmosphere. And when I went into that building, I could feel that was kind of like that was one of my first experience of, in a way, my first experience of the what I would call the paranormal. I didn't see no cavaliers walking around or headless ladies or anything, but it was that feeling. And that's what kind of got me interested in the paranormal in the sense of the history, because I think that the history itself can be just as scary as the actual story of the ghost that haunts the building.
So, and I was going to ask you, because you sort of mentioned something that was intriguing there a little bit there. So you're a huge proponent of the theory then of you entering a location that's reportedly to be haunted.
Yeah.
And you yourself entering that building will change the dynamic, your energy, so to speak, and everything else would change the dynamic of that sort of haunting, if you will.
I think that I understand what you're saying, and that there is. Well, okay, so we can go down that rabbit hole a little bit further if you want.
Sure.
So basically, right, you go into a location that has alleged paranormal activity, and you don't go in, all right? Your mate goes in, and he walks around, and he goes, load of old nonsense. There's nothing going on here. I don't feel nothing. I don't experience nothing. And then you go in, and you feel sad, or you feel anxious, or you see something or experience something. So what we have here is an individual acting as a catalyst for paranormal phenomenon.
Yeah.
That says a lot about, are we, as individuals, some form of electronic or atmospheric or environmental triggers as individuals? So does that mean that what you personally believe, and say you do believe in ghosts and your mate doesn't believe in ghosts, and he sees nothing and you experience something, is it a need that you want to see something that you pick up on past events? Because I'm also a proponent that a great deal of paranormal phenomenon that people witness is just simply history replaying itself, the stone tape, but I do think that there are residual, yeah. But I do think that there is also intelligent residual hauntings, and also hauntings that have, some form of personality or consciousness connected to them. I don't, I always make clear that I don't have any of the answers. I simply have, ideas of what things could possibly be. But I do think that a large number of paranormal phenomenon that you get in these, especially the older locations, is some form of residual haunting that's been that the environment has been impregnated into. Well, for example, if you look at the case in Kenfig in South Wales of the Prince of Wales pub, two electrical engineers, there's at the back of the pub, there is a large building, and it's think of it as a function hall. But this large hall goes back many hundreds of years. It used to be, in the olden days, it was like a courthouse. And many people from this courthouse, were sentenced to death, to hang. So obviously, that's not a good thing. And the people that's in there that says, today you're going to hang. You can imagine the emotion that's let out in that building. So obviously, over the years, the building has changed its usage, and now it's part of the pub, and it's a function room. They were experiencing, back in I think it was the 80s, the landlord, he would say, I'm hearing stuff from the function room. I'm hearing noises like people talking, and I can hear music. I can hear and when I go and investigate it, there's nothing there. So a couple of the locals were electrical engineers. They would, they come to the pub, and they say, look, can we run some experiments? He says, fine. So they put these probes into the wall, metal probes into the wall, into the stonework, because obviously it's a solid stone building. And they basically pump it with thousands and thousands of volts of electricity. And they have recorders in the room, in the mics embedded in the wall, and they have microphones just in the room. And some of the recordings they get back are, you can hear chains, you can hear what sounds like a drawbridge, you can hear people talking, and their theory is that because a lot of the buildings back in those days were, there was a lot of quartz in the stone, and that in some way that there's also silica and stuff, and that acts like a giant tape recorder,
especially quartz.
Yeah. And that in some way, when you charge that, you can release it into the environment, and that what they were recording and capturing was sounds basically of the past. But later on, many years later, a BBC sound engineer they did a news report on the building, and they left him his equipment they locked it in the room overnight. He had a couple of DAT players and some microphones set up just in the room. And in the morning, when they collected the stuff, they asked, did you capture anything? He said, well, actually, I did. And when he plays back the recording, you can clearly hear what sounds like the butt of a walking stick knocking on the wooden floor, or it could have been, well, somebody else suggests that it could have been a judge's hammer. Because it was that sort of thing.
Yeah.
So, and there was no one in the room. The whole building was locked up and it was sealed, and he recorded something. So I do think that a lot of these sounds and what people experience are in residual in some way, but also I think that the individual themselves plays a really big part in them experiencing what they experience.
You know what, Reeves? Alex, do you have the strange sounds at DeForest loaded up?
I have one that's titled DeForest. I'm not sure if that's. I think so. Yeah.
Strange sounds. I want Reeves to hear this, and this is sort of plays into what you're saying, because what's happening here is you're hearing a bunch of sounds.
Yeah.
That weren't audible real time.
Yeah.
There was absolutely nothing around, and this is from an old pioneer cemetery that laid in ruins. I don't know. Do you have it loaded up there, Alex?
I do. Yes.
Okay.
Was this an outdoor or indoor recording?
It's an outdoor recording.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay.
Hang on a sec.
Go ahead.
Okay.
Sounds like doors or something opening and closing or being moved.
Now, given the area, there was an old mansion just off to the north of this old pioneer cemetery that was included with the land. And to me, what I'm gathering, it kind of sounds like it might be storm doors opening up and closing.
Yeah.
But the walking, it sounds like somebody's walking on
Footsteps
like
on
a wooden
gravel.
floor on
Yeah,
gravel. And again, none of this was audible, or there's nothing in the area that would lead into this. It was incredibly eerie.
And there's no house nearby, if I remember correctly.
Not to the extent where you're hearing it.
Right. I mean, there was a house
closer.
further away, but you wouldn't be able to capture that.
Exactly.
It's interesting because there are a number of times when investigators have gone into a haunted or buildings that have got activity, and when they do EVP or they just do stationary remote recording, they don't pick up anything, and yet when they'll review their tapes, they'll have whispers or knocks or clicks. I tried finding it earlier. I had a copy of there was twice, I think it was twice, that Gareth and I caught anomalous voices on when we were recording a podcast.
Yeah, I think Gareth played one of them for us one time.
Very strange.
Yeah.
And we didn't hear anything. What we didn't hear anything as we would think it was a Halloween episode, and we heard it was in between sort of, because usually with EVP, it can be, at times it can be quite subjective, but also with these voices, I did study EVP quite a lot, maybe in the sort of late 2000s. I worked for 13 years, I worked in the music industry, so I had access to quite high quality equipment. And of course, that got me into, obviously, being into the paranormal as well, and finding about EVP and reading up on EVP and reading some books. And I thought, I want to do this.
Yeah.
I must have spent maybe 3 or 4 months staying after work when everybody went home. I would, because obviously the studio was, very isolated and it was quiet. And I would literally just sit there for like 2 hours, just talking into a microphone, asking questions like, is anybody there? Does anybody want to talk to me? And I had a white noise generator, so I was just running that into a tape deck. I think I was going into like a Nakamichi tape deck. So it was all really good quality stuff. And thinking that I was going to be catching the next, spooky ghost or whatever. And I didn't get anything for months. Now, here's the interesting thing. A lot of people tend to, when they capture stuff, it's sometimes, if they all sit in the room and they're just dead quiet, nothing happens. But as soon as they start to get, relax and start to joke around and create a little bit of an energy, a little bit of a sort of atmosphere, that things start to happen. And that's what happened on the night when I caught stuff. I was with a friend of mine, and we had a couple of beers, and we were at the studio. And we had a couple of beers, and he didn't really record, he didn't really sort of believe it. And he had the microphone, and he was like going, woo, and I'm the ghost and all this stuff. And then I said, look, please just be serious and just ask some questions. And he was asking some questions and nothing happened. And I said, right, I'm going to do it. And I asked some questions. And it was, maybe we'd been there for about an hour, maybe an hour and a half. And we played back the tape, because we only did like short recordings of like 2 minutes, because it took, I had to listen back in real time.
It's tedious when you do like 3 or 4
incredibly
hours.
Yes, it is. And I'm listening to this, I wind the tape back, and of course all the tape, we never record over the same section twice, so we would, we have to go back to the next part, and then did it in blocks. And so I'm listening to this section, and I'm hearing is white noise, but then I hear this kind of static click, and I'm like, okay. Immediately I'm thinking, I've not heard anything like that before. Kind of didn't think about it. Maybe about 10 seconds later, I clearly hear, and this is class A, I clearly, as if somebody, I'd given the microphone to them, I clearly hear like a lady's voice, and it was quite posh, I would say it was like what a Victorian lady maybe talked like, very sort of, like the films in the 50s and that. They're all the, everybody had kind of talked a little bit posh. And it said yes. And I'm like, at that point, I'm kind of transfixed in, that's all that matters is what's in my headphones.
Yeah.
And then maybe about 10, maybe 20 seconds later, there's some more kind of clicking or like static. And then I hear a man's voice saying quite clearly, please reply.
Oh, wow.
And I tell you, I took my headphones off, and my friend who was with me, I gave him the headphones and I wound the tape back, and I said, mate, can you just listen to that? Because I thought I was I thought I was just listening, hearing stuff. And he listened to it, and he took the headphones off and he said, I'm going home. I don't, and he wouldn't talk about it. He just would not talk. He said, I said, dude, what did you hear? He goes, I don't know what I heard. I'm going home. And he went, and I'm left there on my own thinking, well, I don't want to do this again at the moment because I don't know what's on that tape. I don't know if I'm talking to the devil. You know what I mean? I don't know.
You're opening a door, Reeves.
Yeah. I remember speaking to somebody at an event, and really nice lady. Okay, really nice lady, very knowledgeable on many aspects of the paranormal. And she says, we're just chatting, and because this is in the days when I was quite new to it and really, really enthusiastic about things. And I'm chatting to her, and I say to her, well, yeah, of course, I'm thinking about getting a Ouija board, aren't I? And she's going, you don't ever want to get one of those, my love. That you're opening up a gateway to hell. And I'm like,
yeah,
I'm like thinking to myself, I had these visions of like my house disappearing into the ground and stuff. And I remember a story. I'm going to go back a bit now. I'm going to go back to sort of many, many years. I was very friendly with the another late actually, Lou Gentili.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
I was a huge Lou fan. I used to love his show.
Well, yeah. And well, his show was great
Yeah.
if he could hold back his temper. Because sometimes he would get so angry with people that he would just say, that's it, the show's over. And then he would just hang up. And I'm like, Lou, what are you doing? And he's like, I'm done, dude. I'm done.
Well, I got a kick out of it when he took the James Randi challenge.
Yes. Oh, he had a thing about that.
Yeah.
That's my money. I'm going to prove it. That's my money.
He did the thing with the EVPs, right? He says,
that's right.
I can get an EVP anytime.
I must say that some of the EVPs he sent me were, I mean, he used to capture some very, very scary EVP. I remember talking to him once. He was outside of an asylum, and he was doing an investigation. He was in his car, and I was talking to him over, just like over the internet. And I'm like, what are you doing? He says, I'm parked up. I'm doing an investigation. And he said, I'm already getting EVPs already. And he plays his recorder over over his phone. This is like the early days of voice over IP, so it's not very clear.
Yeah.
And he plays it, and all I can hear is sounds like swear words. And he's going, "Yep, definitely something going on here." And I'm like, Lou, do you want to go in there with all that? And some of the stories that he would tell, and he was very friendly with a priest that used to do exorcisms. And he would go with this priest sometimes to document what he was doing. And some of the stories that he would tell me, he went into a building. There was a guy who had a spate of incredible bad luck. And he ended up going to the clergy, to the church, because everything he did in his life went wrong. He lost his job. He got into problems. He got into lots of debt, and he tried to do the right thing, and everything he did went wrong. He went to the clergy and he said, "Look, I think I'm cursed. I think I think there's a devil in me or something." And he got directed to this priest, and Lou came along to witness this thing. And some of the stuff he told me, he said that he was in the room with this guy, and that the furniture was moving, and that there was sounds in the room, there was smells in the room, and he said it was just completely bizarre. And when you listen to stuff like that,
Mhm.
and you know, it's kind of like you think to yourself, you know, how would I act?
Yeah.
Well, I know how I would. I would have most probably. I'd be back at home watching telly, eating crisps, because I'm like, I don't want none of that, thanks. But how do you, how do you sort of, when you're in that environment and that's something like that happens, how do you respond? How does that,
It's
how does that
tough.
affect you? Because I've never, uh, I've had experiences when
Mhm.
I live in a very, well, I'm say very old. I live in a late 18th century. Well, I'm going to say it this way, but I'm not a king or anything. I live in an 18th century mansion, but it's not
Yeah.
mine. Okay, I
Yeah.
rent an apartment in it
Yeah.
because they're
Yeah.
because there's so many. It's a massive building.
Yeah.
It's converted into apartments,
Yeah.
and where I live, the the old part is where I sleep,
Mhm.
and it used to be. It's got steps at the front of it, which come down to my bay window, which is, I reckon, that is where the servants would bring stuff, because
Okay.
obviously you'd never have deliveries and that at the front door.
Yeah.
All the food and stuff would be, and the servants would come through the bottom of the house through the
Mhm.
basement. So I'm
Yeah.
kind of living in the basement in a way, although the house does go deeper because next door the apartment goes down another level, but I'm just below, like, the ground floor. But anyway, when I first moved, I've lived in here a number of years, and when I first moved in here,
Mhm.
the front part of where I live is kind of built, I would say, in the 70s, so it's quite modern,
Mhm.
quite. And the back part is where I sleep. Now, when I first moved in here, I was moving stuff in. I told Gareth this. I was moving stuff in, and my door was open,
Yeah.
and I felt as if there's something ran past my legs, like a cat or something like that, somewhat small.
Okay.
And I kind of looked down and looked down this way. It's like a hallway that goes back to the back of the apartment. And I thought, oh, the bleeding cat in my house, isn't there? It's not my cat. But and I had this sort of thing of trying to, chase this cat around. And but there was no cat. There was nothing. But it actually felt like something ran between my legs. And it was weird. And
Damn pussy.
yeah, well, it just weird. It was just weird. And also, this is another weird thing. When I'm in bed, where the window is, right, where it's got steps, the steps are still there. They left the steps there.
Yeah.
You can walk down the steps to the window, and you can't go anywhere. Well, I suppose you could clean the window, but yeah, I've yet to do that, and I've been here for 4 years. But there you go. The thing is that when you come down the steps and you're by the window, which used to be a doorway, so they put a window in. When I'm in bed, I always get the feeling that I want to look towards the window. I don't know what it is. So I'm in bed and I'm looking to my right
Yeah.
towards the window, because I feel all the time that, yeah, there's something, not something there, but because that's part of the room where I need to be looking. And I think that I've thought about this, and maybe in the olden days, back in the olden days, way before the 1980s,
The olden days.
the olden days, uh, I, I'm thinking, right, that maybe that because there was so much activity going in and out of there, maybe that was like the main route where all the servants would come in and out and stuff. Because obviously back in the old days, all the servants would work in the basement. They do all the cooking and the cleaning and that.
Yeah.
And at night, because a lot of them would stay, because a lot of these buildings are 3 to 4 story, they would stay in the roof, up in the attic. That's,
Mhm.
they obviously they would work in the house and do the
Yeah.
fires and all the things, but they wouldn't really be seen unless they needed to be. So I'm thinking maybe because there was a lot of activity, that in some way that part of the house has been imprinted with something, and maybe I'm subconsciously picking up on it. I'm not psychic. I'm not saying that I'm psychic. I'm not. But maybe in some way, subconsciously, I'm picking up on that.
Mhm.
But yeah, so I don't even know what I was talking about. I went off on a complete tangent there,
That's
and I
okay.
completely lost my train of thought of what your original question was.
Well, we're going to take a quick break here.
Okay.
We'll take a quick break, and we'll pick it up when we come back. that's the whole point, though, Reeves. This is why we do this, and keep it open, because the conversation, it flows, and I love it. And I want to
Okay.
thank you again for joining us tonight.
You're welcome.
All right, so hold tight, folks. We'll be right back. You're watching Nocturnal Frequency. kind of like a scream.
Yeah, there you go. There you go. And we're back. We're back.
Yes. Thanks. Oh man. Thanks for joining. Oh, my throat now.
Steve's just choked on something. See? This is why we take breaks, people. Because Steve has to choke.
Exactly. Thank you for joining us on Nocturnal Frequency Radio. And oh my God, now my voice is all screwed up. I want to thank Reeves for joining us tonight. Thanks again, Reeves. Oh my God.
Now he sounds like a puberty boy.
It's either that or he's early stages of possession, of course.
Yeah,
Possession.
yeah. I think that's what we're gonna go with.
Stages.
You know, oh my God, talking about possession. I don't know if you guys watched that. What Archive 81?
It's on my list to watch.
Oh, excuse me. Oh my God, that's weird. Talk about weird cult stuff. Anyways, back to the paranormal aspect of things. Now, I wanted to ask you, Reeves, why the paranormal? I mean, what brought you into the realm of the paranormal?
Okay,
I mean,
yes.
what interests you? What sparked your interest?
Funny enough, I have a story about that. Right, so we need to go all the way back to when I was a young kid, and I was maybe 6 or 7 years old. My late father, who's no longer with us, but he was totally into the whole UFOs. He was a member of the British UFO Society, a paid-up member. He would go to the meetings. He would, get all the pamphlets and everything. He would buy all the books at the time, Jacques Vallée and so on, Daniken, von Daniken, and he had all the books. Quite a nice little library. I've inherited some of those from back in the day. So he was the kind of catalyst for me to be interested in UFOs to start with. I didn't have any interest in ghosts or hauntings or anything like that. I wasn't at an age where I could kind of really understand. To me, a ghost back then was someone with a sheet over their head. That was a ghost. The sort of thing you would see on Scooby-Doo,
Yeah, I was going to say Scooby-Doo.
Yeah, but UFOs, because I think with aliens and sci-fi, Flash Gordon, that I kind of understood a little bit more what a UFO possibly was, and it had spacemen in it, and in my little child head, that's I kind of went towards that. Now, of course, that's me. I'd look at my dad's books and I'd look at all the pictures and stuff, and I didn't read anything. I was only a little kid and I didn't have no interest. I just wanted to do pictures. But it really changed for me when he took me. He said, "You're coming to the pictures. We're going to the pictures. It's a special day. We're going to the pictures." And he took me to see Close Encounters of the Third Kind.
No.
The epic
Classic.
that is.
Classic.
And I remember being there with my dad and my brother, and I was completely brainwashed by the film. I couldn't take my eyes off the screen. To me, it was just an epic film. I was just like, wow. I mean, first you're wowed you get wowed when you're a child by the likes of Star Wars. You go and see that, and it's like, oh my God. But then you see like Close Encounters as well, and it's like, oh my double God, And I really got into it from that point on. And he started to give me his books and stuff and magazines, and I would look at them and, read them as best I could. As I say, I didn't really read them. But it was later on that I started to get an interest in the wider field of the paranormal and ghosts and other mysteries when, of course, thanks to the great Arthur C. Clarke.
Oh yeah.
You know, he would the TV series, you know, Arthur C. Clarke's Mysterious World, and he would bring, you know, the shows, because we didn't have. I mean, of course, I've watched them now, but we didn't have the great In Search Of. You know, we didn't have anything like that, you know,
Mhm.
at the time. But I've seen them have since, and they're
Yeah.
just as great. They're on the same level as Arthur C. Clarke, you know, over here, and I would watch all these episodes. I think it was 7:30 on a Sunday evening,
Mhm.
so I had to time it just right. Because being a kid, I had to have my bath and have my dinner, so I'd watch it just before I went to bed. You know, it's like I had to time it right, and I was lucky enough because my dad was into it all, so he'd let us watch it.
So he'd let you
And
watch it. Awesome. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So I mean, you were seeing like, you know, the Loch Ness monster, and you know, human combustion, and all this stuff, and I'm seeing all this stuff, and my little brain is kind of like going, wow, this is just this is amazing. It's not just you. And of course they had some great UFO cases on there, and of course I just started to really get an interest for it. And of course by that time I was a little bit older, and I was buying the magazines, and I was buying the Unexplained magazine and reading it, and I was actually reading it and sort of digesting all this information and learning about the cases, and really starting to get an appetite for it. Now, if we go forward to about 19, you get old, you start forgetting dates, but it must have been 1981, 82.
Okay.
My friend, we used to live in a house, and this house backed onto a very large cricket field, and being backing on, it's relevant. So backing onto a cricket field, there's no street lighting, so it's completely dark. So you
Okay.
don't get any of that kind of light pollution. There were lights around, but there wasn't direct lighting. You know, you could see the night sky,
But it was
and
creepy. The main
it was
part
a
is
bit creepy.
creepy.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it was a bit. And of course, you're at that age where you want to have a sneaky cigarette. And we're hanging out the bedroom window, me and my mate, because my mate, back then your mates would kip over,
Mhm.
and having a sneaky cigarette. And I'm looking up at the sky, and it's really dark. It's the middle of the summer, and I'm like, "Do you see that?" And he's like, "Well, yeah," and it's a plane. Well, planes don't just stand in the sky like that. And it's this. We're seeing this bright light, and it's moving slowly. It's coming off the coast, because obviously we live in a seaside town, and at that time we weren't very far from the actual sea. So it's coming off the sea, off the coast, and it's coming over us towards us, and it sort of stops in the sky. And we're like looking at it, and we're thinking, we're debating, like, what is it? You know, we start joking that it's the aliens have come to get us and stuff. And then we see another light coming from the other side, and it comes over and it stops in the sky. And as crazy as this sounds, a few minutes go by, and we see another light coming. And there's 3 points of bright light in the sky, in the night sky, and quite high up. And by this time, I'm shouting to my dad over the banisters, "Dad, come up, get you," because he had these great big binoculars, because he used to go out and like do sky watches and stuff.
Mhm.
And he comes up and he's going, "Oh, what's going on? What's going on?" And he looks at him and he goes, "Oh, I'll go get my binoculars." And he goes and gets his binoculars, and he's looking out the he's looking out the window, and he's got his binoculars on, and all I can hear him, he's like, "Good Lord, bugger me, good God." And me and my mate are looking at each other, thinking, what's he seeing? You know, what's he seeing? And I was going, "Give us a go, Dad." And he's like, "Oh, I'll hold them in front of your face because they're very expensive." And of course, he's holding them, pointing them, and we're like me and my mate are trying to look through each like little bit to see. And we're like, looking through, and we're seeing these kind of glistening white balls. And of course, we're not really looking properly. And he's looking, and he's thinking, "Oh, I'm going to have to make a report about this." And as we're sort of watching them, this whole episode lasts for about 10, maybe 15 minutes. And the two points of light that are at the bottom of this, what I call a triangle, move away slowly in the direction that they come from. There's no sound. There's no humming of because we thought they were helicopters, and there's no helicopter sound. Drones weren't, drones like they are today weren't around. Maybe they were drones, but who knows whose. Um, but the one at the top, that just hung there for a little bit longer, and it didn't go anywhere. It just shot straight up in the sky, just gone. And well, I don't know what that was. I have no clue what that was, and that was
Did,
my.
did you question your insanity? Your sanity, I mean,
I was
at that
well,
point.
I was a
Even
kid.
even even if you were a kid, we were like, okay, like, okay.
Um, I thought, well, I immediately thought it was aliens. Me and my mate was going, that was
Really?
that was definitely aliens.
So give
But
us a picture of
it,
your thoughts of what
just
was an
everything.
alien? An alien.
An alien is in the sense of everything that we'd seen in an Arthur C. Clarke, unexplained magazine, which would
Okay,
have been a
yeah.
cross between a lizard and a metallic robot,
Yeah.
because it was like some of these things that people have seen are completely off the wall. And of
Yeah.
course, we're thinking, I mean, when you're a kid, you don't really sort of, how can you put it? You don't sort of sit down on your bed and go, "Let me just digest what I've just seen." You don't. It's either an alien that's going to kill you, or an
Yeah.
alien that's going to take you to another planet. It's like your imagination runs away with you, and we didn't stop talking about it for, gosh, ages. It was a long time, and I remember going to school, and this kid comes up to me and he goes, "So you seen a flying saucer then, did you?" And I'm like, "Yeah, it was me and so and so. We. All right. So how do you know it was a flying saucer?" And he was like, uh, "Well, because it was." And it was like, and then you'd make up this story around it, and it was like, you have to be careful when you're a kid. You kind of, everything is an adventure, and
So you embellished a little.
yeah, you kind of,
Yeah.
and we're just sort of like, yeah, well, it was me. I'm obviously special because it's, and you start making all these kind of crazy things up. But and you think about it when you're older, you think back and think, well, you definitely saw something. You don't know what it was, but it was definitely something weird. And the great thing about it was, if I'll be honest with you, if my dad wasn't there, and I think back to that experience, I would have most probably questioned myself now to think I was a kid, and I had an experience I couldn't understand, so maybe I imagined it, and it's a false memory in my head. Because let's be honest, when you experience something that
Yeah.
as a human being, when you experience something that you don't understand, the first thing to do is to tell yourself that you're mistaken, that it never happened, that you are. If I was to go in my kitchen right now and a cup slide along the counter, which I hope it doesn't, but if it did, the first thing I'm going to do is think, oh, it's obviously a wet counter, or there was a mini earthquake. Are you going to do everything you can to kind of rationalize what just happened?
Exactly.
And
I
I
mean,
think,
I find myself, trying to rationalize, but at the
yeah,
same time, if something just totally weird happens
yeah,
in
Well,
my mind,
most people try to rationalize it.
yeah,
can I recreate that? If I can recreate that,
yeah.
obviously it's nothing major. But
hmm
if I can't recreate that, then okay, then what?
I tell you a weird story, and I don't mind talking about this now. I was a little bit closed off about it a few
Mhm.
year ago, but now it's neither here. It's
Wait
an
a sec.
experience.
Are we getting a Reeves exclusive here?
No, not really, because I've already told it, but I'll,
Okay.
I'll tell it again.
Okay.
Um, kind of, not on
Oh.
your show, maybe.
Okay.
So as people know that I was a carer for my dad for 2 years. He died of
Mm.
cancer, so he
Sorry
didn't
to
want
hear.
any nurses or anything. He wanted me, being the oldest son. He wanted me to look after him and be with him in his last sort of 18 months on planet Earth.
Mhm.
So I like, yeah, no, it's fine. I can do that. Obviously, there are certain things that I'm not going to be putting them on the toilet or anything. I had, nurses would come in and do things like that. So
Yeah.
they're professionals. They know how to do stuff like that. But I needed to be there to cook his meals and do the shopping and all that. So when you're with a parent, for in that kind of situation, you the dynamic changes in a way. So
Yeah.
let me just say that my dad was always my dad, and my dad was the kind of bloke that when he was a kid, he didn't need to tell you what to do. He just needed to look at you a particular way, and you knew what he needed to do. An ex-grenadier guard, 6'2",
Oh wow. Yeah.
15 stone, so you didn't really mess with him. And he went from that to a 5 stone skeleton in
Oh
less
wow.
than 18 months.
Sorry
And
to
I'm
hear.
literally carrying him up the stairs. And
Mm.
he's, do you know what I mean? It's just it is an
Yeah.
absolutely bizarre situation to be in. But I must say, on a positive note, you come out of it with a completely different mindset. When you look at things and you look at challenges in life, you have a completely different mindset towards things. And it motivated me to do a lot of things that I was dragging my arse to do. And I'm thinking, no, I got to get on with this and get it done because you've just gone through this thing. Anyway, my dad would nearer the time, and I, of course, Peter Fenwick and other people, they've written books and done lectures on stuff like this. They talk about deathbed visions and people coming to visit people who are near death, especially in the hospice and stuff like that. The last 3 weeks of my dad's life, it got to a point where it became, I wasn't able to care for him because he was dying of cancer. He was medicated, but he needed proper medication, like proper like morphine and stuff, because it was crazy. And anyway, so he needed to go into a hospice, and he wanted to go into a hospice because he knew that, I remember being awake for 3 days because he was going through an episode of just constantly in pain. And I tell you, right, I was hallucinating. I literally was hallucinating because I was been awake for so long, and that's not good for anyone.
No.
And so anyway, so I'm, I talk with my brother because I have a brother, and we talk, and it's like, yeah, that's the thing we need to do. He needs to go to the hospice. So we go into hospice, and he's like, he seems a bit happier because he knows that he's on his, he hasn't got to do anything more. He can stay in bed and just watch telly, and the end will come, sort of thing. So he's kind of chill about it. And what happens is, the last week of his life, we get a phone call from the duty nurse, and I'm the oldest, so I get the call first, and it's like 5 o'clock in the morning. And she rings me up and she says, Reeves, do you want to come down? I think your dad's not long before he goes. He's starting to, because I don't know, I don't want to be morbid or anything. I don't want to be. There is a reason for me saying this, but I don't want to be morbid. But when people are near death, they do start to make noises. Okay, and they start to gurgle and stuff like that because of the breathing becomes more erratic.
And
they start to like crackle and stuff. And of course, when you're in a room with someone who's on the cusp of checking out, it's a weird sensation. And I'm sat one side of the bed, and my brother's sat the other side of the bed, and I think it's about 5:45 in the morning. And my dad, you got to remember, my dad is medicated on morphine, and he's literally been asleep for 2 weeks. Like he's just not, he's just been asleep.
Yeah.
And I'm looking at my brother, and he's looking at me, and my dad's making all these weird noises, and I'm like thinking, any minute he's just gonna expire. That's it, doink, gone, game over. And
that must have been so tough for you, Ben.
It was like, do you know what I liken it? Do you know what I liken it to? When you go with your mates, right, and you go to the amusement park, right, and then there's the girl that you want to take to dinner or buy a pizza, and you think, I want her to see that I'm a man, so I'm going to go on the roller coaster with all my mates, but I hate roller coasters. And then you get on that roller coaster, and before it goes, you got all this anticipation about what's going to happen. Am I gonna wet myself? Am I gonna cry? All that. It's that kind of feeling. And anyway, so he's making all these noises, and I'm looking at my brother, and my brother's looking at me and thinking, any minute now he's gonna be gone. And he doesn't. He literally opens his eyes, and he sits up in bed as best he can, and he's pointing, and he's just pointing directly ahead of him. And then he starts to smile, and it's just as if he's watching someone at the bottom of the bed walk from right to left, on the bottom of the bed. And I'm looking at my brother, and my brother's looking at me, and I'm like, are you seeing this? And he's like, yeah, I know. And the weird thing was, the whole dynamic of the room changed. It was if, this is going to sound really weird, right? But my brother attests to this. It is as if the room kind of shifted out of, for a split second, but it kind of shifted out of reality. Like we weren't we weren't in the same time frame as everyone else was on planet Earth at that moment. But it only lasted for about maybe 5-6 seconds, and then he just
Maybe a slight little bit
it
of hope, thinking, okay, everything's going to be okay, sort of thing.
it was it was very strange. And then
Yeah.
he just sort of led back down, and he just went back to sleep. And he would just
Mm.
and I'm like looking at my brother, and he's looking at me, and I'm like, I had to get up and I'm going to go get a coffee, and I went out to there was this kind of kitchen there, you could make drinks and stuff.
Mhm.
And I'm like thinking to myself, because I'd read all this stuff about people with deathbed visions and stuff and things like that, and I'm thinking, did he just see? Is it the medication, or why would he not be doing that more often? If the medication is causing him to hallucinate, why isn't he
Mhm.
waking up all the time and seeing crazy stuff? Why would he do it at that moment, at the point of him nearly dying,
Mhm.
when he's clearly seeing something in his mind or whatever? But why would we feel that the room changed? Is that us? Is that our own? Are we just kind of reacting to him? Or what's going on there? And it
You
was,
guys are sensing, like you
yeah,
said, a shift
it
in
was
the
a
energy
weird,
that perhaps
it was weird.
something else was there with
Yeah.
you guys.
Well, I don't know. I mean, there are cases out there where
Mm.
there's been family members in rooms, and they've noticed people in the room that they don't know who they are, and then slightly after the person's passed away, the person that was in the group that nobody knew who they were is no longer in the group. So there are cases like that, but I didn't experience anything like that. But it
Mhm.
was. Anyway, so yeah, so maybe it was maybe a few days later that my dad did pass away. Early one morning, we got a phone call, and the nurse said, "I'm very sorry to say that your dad is
Mm.
he's we weren't able to be there because he literally passed in his sleep, so he couldn't be there 24 hours a day.
Yeah, yeah.
But we had jobs and stuff, but it just that's the way it went, and it was somebody was with him obviously because there was nurses there all the time, but it
Yeah.
was just but here's the weird thing: about 3 days after that had happened, I was on, uh, I was not working or anything because of the funeral and all that stuff, and I'm sat in bed, and I think it's about maybe 7-8 o'clock in the morning, and I'm completely wide awake, right?
Mm.
Completely wide awake. I'm not dreaming or just woken up. I'm sat in bed thinking, what do I need to do today? And clearly, as if he stood in the room with me, but like from my right side above me in the
Mm.
corner of the room, I hear him call my name, Reeves, like that.
Mm.
And I look, and I'm thinking, what I'm thinking my dad just called my name and in my room, and there's nothing there. So that was weird. It was bizarre.
Alex can relate to that because I
Yeah.
know
Yeah.
Alex, you had a like something happened when your dad passed away.
Yeah, my dad passed away of cancer as well. The night my experience was the very night he passed. So he passed overnight around maybe 2:30 in the morning, give or take. And when I went to go see him, after I finished work, I went straight to go see him because I was working the late shift. Spent some time with him. My sister was going to be spending the night that night. So I went home after seeing him, and he was like your dad. He was on morphine because he was terminal. We knew he was going to die. We just didn't know it was going to be that night. So I go home and I try to get some sleep, and I'm tossing and turning. I keep looking at the clock. I start drifting off into that sort of half in and out state around 2:30 because that's the last time I checked the time. And when I'm in that state, I guess you can call it a dream or a vision, whatever you want to call it, but it was a hazy, foggy background, and I see my dad sort of smiling and waving, and then he disappeared.
Yeah.
Shortly after that, my sister calls from the hospital, letting us know that he had just passed. Right, so that's the experience I had with my dad when he passed away.
Yeah, it's a similar thing. That's a similar thing.
Yeah,
but it's I had something similar when my mum died maybe a year before my dad went, and she died in her sleep at home, and it was in their bedroom. They had these like fixed wardrobes, and they would she every night she would fold all her clothes up and open the drawers at the top. They'd make this kind of clicking sound when you opened and closed them. and she would put all her clothes in there and close it down. And after my mum had passed away, because after my mum died, my dad went up a bit, off the rocks a bit, and I had to come back home for a while, and and just make sure everything was cool. He wasn't going to do anything crazy, and I put myself in the what we call the spare room, because I'm not. I don't want to be weird. I didn't want to sleep in the room that my mum died in. I just
nothing weird about that. I mean,
I just think, I'm here. I've come back home. I'll just go in the spare room. Yeah, I'm in the spare room. I'm in the junk room. I'm all right in there, and I'm in there, and I tell you, 3 nights on the trot, I can hear those slat things going clink, clink, and about around the time that my mum would normally go to bed. And I remember, the 3rd night, I thought, if it does it again, because I just thought, do you know what I actually thought? I thought it was my dad going up into the bedroom and maybe moving them, or I just, I immediately thought that. And I thought, the 3rd night, I'm going to go and look. And when I hear it, I'm going to go and I'm going to grow some, I'm going to go. So I hear them, and it's about maybe, I don't know, 11:30, 11:45. And I walk out of the room, I open my door, and all the landing is completely dark. And my dad has gone to bed. All right. So he's out of the picture. And because my dad and my mum, they had separate rooms, because my dad had a back condition, and he needed a really like a hard mattress, and my mum couldn't sleep on it, so she used to sometimes sleep in, because it was a 3-bedroom house, so she had a second room, and that was the room that she slept in that she died. And do you know what, when you got to remember, I'm in pitch blackness. I don't turn the lights on. I'm looking into the room, and the door is maybe, I don't know, 10 inches ajar, and I can't really see into the room because the curtains are drawn. And it's like staring into the abyss. I don't want to go in the room, because everything is there. Everything is there as if my mum was just getting ready to go to bed or whatever. She's not there. They've moved her away, and But here's the thing. This is the creepy thing. When there was nothing in the room, obviously, because it was an empty room. But when I pushed the door open to get more light, and I turned the landing light on, I could see the imprint on the bed, on the pillow of where my mum was. Obviously, they moved her away, and it, because everything was just left, because this has only happened a couple of days, and I didn't want to go in there and start tearing stuff up. Let my dad sort of get used to the fact that his wife just died, and it was just such a weird feeling, and it goes back to us as kind of barometers, or some sort of where we pick up on certain things and certain emotions, and
at the same time, Reeves, in the case of your father and Alex with his, the fact that the DNA, the link, the energy, you have a shared energy, and you're sort of patched into that.
Yeah.
And I wholeheartedly believe that plays a huge part in the experience that you had, and again, what Alex experienced.
It's like the phone call phenomenon, where you can have a friend that you're quite close to, or a family member that you're quite close to, and the phone rings, and maybe 10 seconds before the phone rings, you think of them for some reason. You think, oh, I haven't spoken to them for a while, or they pop into your head, and then suddenly the phone rings and it's them. Yeah. And this has happened. That's happened to me on a number of occasions, and I expect it's happened to a lot of people on many occasions. So I think there is some truth to what you say there, where if you are connected to somebody, whether it's a wife or a family member, and that you have a connection, I do think that there is a possibility that in some way you become more connected with that person when you are at a distance, because I'm just going to say that when there's been disasters around the world, when there's proper like serious disasters and people that have lost their lives, when they've been crisis apparitions, is the what the kind of generic term. But when there can be a wife 10,000 miles away who suddenly sees her husband who's meant to be on the other side of the world or on a ship or something, and he suddenly appears and then disappears. And it's kind of a maybe it's a mental thing, maybe it's a mental projection, maybe we do see I'm of the mindset that when you say brain, when you say mind, they're two completely different things. And I think that with the mind brain, the brain is the meat in your head, the mind is the bit that
the energy
you
bit.
call the energy, the consciousness, and I do think that in some way maybe the consciousness to a degree is not actually in us. It's connected out there somehow, and we're all connected to a I don't want to get all weird and matrixy or anything like that.
It's okay. We get like that all the time.
But I just think
for us.
I try not to use those generic terms because people get, you could, we're in the Matrix, it's like, well, yeah, that's a film. But I understand what you're trying to get to me. Yeah, I do think that, the electronic universe or whatever you want to call it, that there is some form of, that's another tangent, that we live in a computer program. But then there you go, the spirit world. What is it? We're going down all these different alleyways, but they're all legitimate, should be discussed. But I think that unfortunately, TV, the media, entertainment, has changed our view on how you perceive certain things.
Exactly.
And it started, 30 years ago when things started to get popular. You'd get the odd ghost show on TV, or you'd get the UFO show on TV. But then all of a sudden, in the sort of the 90s, late 80s, early 90s, it exploded, and you had all these shows pumping out all this stuff, and you had all these people going on who were whatever and did this and did that.
Well, now we can thank a lot of the specialty networks, right? They're looking for content.
Well,
content to please
I
us,
remember.
right?
I'll say that I remember watching the first. See, I was never a most haunted. I was never a most haunted person. My mum used to watch that religiously, and I was like, how can you watch that? It's just so, I'm not going to swear, but I was just, how can you watch that? But she was like, I enjoy it. It doesn't matter. I enjoy it. All right, you enjoy it. Fair enough. But then there's me, right? There's me going upstairs and putting on my satellite and watching a bit of taps,
Yeah.
So it's the yin and yang, isn't it? So I'm watching. That was the first kind of show that I really got into and started to realize that, how can I put it? I started to care about those people on that show. And I used to go, when they went on an investigation, I was kind of going with them. I was in that van at the back. I was going with them, and I wanted to. And of course, it was great. But then, of course, we started to realize, I think was it Amy Broom or
Brennan.
She then turned around and said, but they're all making stuff up. The production agency, they want stuff to happen every week, so they're kind of splicing it in a way that doing the edits so that it looks like more happens.
I think a lot of people realize that, though. I mean, you're watching a TV show. It's entertainment, and you got to feed the frenzy, right? I mean, those people that have been in the field that go out and investigate, they know that. Look at. There's no way you're going to show the 3 or 4 hours in between each edit. They'd be way too bored. You got to show the meat and the bones, but you're not always going to get evidence. So of course, you're going to throw something.
I remember watching I can't remember what it was, but it was from way back in I think the mid 70s, and it was a ghost documentary, a British one, and there was your archetypal ghost, ghost investigator. So you had your, remember, call him Colin, right? And he had a suit, a tweed jacket on, and some trainers or shoes. He was a kind of he was a lecturer, and that he did this in his part-time sort of thing, and he had a sports car or whatever, and a dog, and he had a few, notebook and a tape recorder, and he was, the guy's being interviewed, and they're in this like stately home, or it's an old house, and they're filming it, and it's like a half an hour show, and absolutely nothing happened, and but you were enthralled. You were watching it, and you were like thinking, I want to be a ghost investigator. I'm sure I saw that curtain move. It's like, it was like that. And when you fast forward now, we've gone from like sort of a 10 to like a 10,000, because unless people are running around the house screaming like mental cases, and there's lights and things flying around, it's not exciting. I think that people have become a little bit desensitized to
exactly
that they need to be frightened, they need to be shocked. It all has to happen. I mean, you just go on YouTube and you type in ghost investigation, and it's all like jump scares and stuff, and it's like, as soon as I start experiencing that, it's like, bye, you're done. I
think we can blame the MTV sort of era for that.
No,
the quick edits, we want fast reaction and bang. The music videos, everything was quickly edited, and our attention spans, look at, they shortened.
Yeah. And I think you are right there. I think that we do get to a point where everything has to happen like instantly, and I do think that our attention as well, when it comes to like the paranormal phenomenon, it's like, I don't want to sit in a room for half an hour and maybe hear what I think might be a rap or whatever. I don't want that.
It's tough. Like, okay, so I've been researching and investigating the paranormal for, I don't know, so many years now. But I still, we sort of alluded to, a little bit to it earlier about, doing sort of audio work, if you will, EVP sessions or whatever. And some people will do short sessions because they don't have the patience to go through 3 or 4 hours of audio. I do. I'll sit there religiously and listen to it. But I'll tell you, there was one point 10 years ago, roughly around 10 years ago, we've been doing research and investigations at this old farmhouse for 10 years, over 10 years now. And I went back and reviewed the very first, like the video footage that we collected from the very first time that we went into the house. And because I was going to go back and rework it for a documentary. And I'm going through this footage and I'm going, wow, how did I miss this? There was a portion in the beginning when I had the videographer go through the house and document it just for, obviously for reference down the road, for whatever. I just love to have visual documentation.
It's always good to do that, because if things move, and
exactly. And all of a sudden, he centers on this portrait of a little girl in period piece. The portrait is called Cherry Ripe, and it is sort of I believe the same vein as there's an old English song of the same name by an English singer called Cherry Ripe. And, as he's like focused on this picture, in the background, you start hearing a little girl singing
Mm.
and reciting, either singing or reciting a nursery rhyme. And I'm like, how the hell? Because there's nobody there with him. It's just him in the house. You hear people down at on the main level in in at the entrance lobby area,
Yeah.
but you're like, this girl is clearly right there with him.
Yeah.
Alex, I don't know. Do you have that loaded up?
The child singing one? Yes, I do.
Yes.
Okay.
And I don't know if it's going to come through, unfortunately, but
Well, we'll give it a shot.
Yeah, give it a shot.
Okay, here we go.
Did you hear that, Reeves?
I heard. Was it the one? It sounded like a bit of a monotone sort of voice in the background.
Okay,
Like,
so you hear some voices downstairs in the background,
but
and
it's quite loud. It's quite loud.
It's quite loud, but then
Yeah.
all of a sudden you hear this sort of girl or female voice sort of reciting a song or singing,
like a poem or something.
Yeah, play it again, Alex.
Okay.
Yeah, I do hear it, and do you know what I find fascinating about that? Is that the voice is resonating to the room, as if it's actually in the room.
Exactly.
It's actually like as if you were in the room and you were talking. You would get some sort of, your voice would bounce off the walls basically, and you'd get that echo.
It's right there.
Yeah.
And I'll send you the link so you can see the video, the actual video of this, so to give you a better perspective. But I totally missed that the very first time going through the footage.
Yeah.
And then 10 years later, I pull it out of the archives and I start watching it again. I'm like, wow.
When I was doing EVP, I mean, obviously there was no, like it is now, everything is digital, but back then it was all on analog tape.
Yeah, analog. Yeah.
And so it's kind of, I would use a white noise generator, and I would obviously, it was multi-frequency, so I could change the frequency, and and I would all try different things because I was kind of trying, seeing what worked, and there was no rule book to say you have to do it a particular way, and I would often capture what sounded like more than one voice, but it was right down in the sound in the low end, and you're not there's like all the noises there and all the all the garble and everything, and it's like I can't make out what's being said, but it sounds like lots of things are being said. But then again, I started to do EVP differently. I started to use a fan, putting
a fan is amazing.
near a fan. Yeah. And also, because there is the fan phenomenon, which is a bit creepy, but it's the way that your brain works.
Yeah.
I remember having a fan, right? I remember having a fan in my bedroom of my old house, and the old house wasn't like an old thing like this. It was modern, so it was very hot in the summer. So you'd leave the windows open and stuff, or run a fan 24 hours a day, because we don't have air conditioning over it. It doesn't get that hot for that long.
Yeah.
And so I'm running a fan, and every night I can hear what sounds like rave music playing, and I'm thinking, who's having parties every night just because it's warm? Don't you go to work? You just party. What? And every time I turn the fan off, then the music goes. And I came to the conclusion, I did a little bit of digging, and first of all, I came to the conclusion it's something to do with the fan. Firstly, I'm thinking it's the motor.
Infrasound?
Well, it's the way that the brain tries to make sense of a noise it doesn't really understand. It's just subconscious. It's trying to figure out, and so it's pulling up information in that you have to kind of make sense. So it's that fan phenomenon. But also, I've tried capturing EVPs with water, running water, and I've had. Well, I wouldn't say I've had a lot of success with it, but once again, I've captured sounds that sound like voices. It sounds like people talking. If you talk to people who go caving, the deep cavers that go right down in um, they have experienced people having conversations, and they can hear people talking while they're the only few people that are really, really deep in the earth caving, and they can hear people like having conversations, down the end of a shaft which seems impossible to get to. The only thing I can think of is that those sounds are potentially being carried from somewhere else, or the environment that they're in some way is reproducing those sounds from somewhere else.
It's funny that you mentioned that, because I remember watching some guy on YouTube
I think
you're probably the same
I think maybe yeah.
He went into a mining cave.
That's right.
An old mine.
Yeah.
And he went to a certain point, and he was hearing stuff.
He got very scared.
He got very scared and then pulled out.
Yeah.
And that's interesting. We've had a really good friend of ours who's been on the show several times, Michael Esposito. He's a musician by trade, but he does a lot of experimentation with different means to capture EVP. And in fact, a lot of the music that he puts together is based on his EVP work.
Mm-hmm.
And this guy has used almost every tool that you could things that you would never think of.
Yeah.
He has used, and you're like, wow, how? It's incredible.
Really trying to think of the band. They made quite a big deal of it. It was a few years, well, more than a few years ago. Yeah. They recorded an album in a studio I think the studio was converted. It was an old manor house that was converted into a residential studio. Okay. And they recorded an album. And every time they tried to lay down tracks, they would end up with random voices on the multi-track tape.
Wow.
And they couldn't understand, because sometimes, I mean, I'm in a band. I've been in the studio quite a few times, and you can get a phenomenon where I don't think you get that anymore, because it's all digital now. Back in the day when I would go in the studio, it was all multi-track. Yeah. It was all on tape. So you had a master reel, a multi-track master reel.
Yeah.
And you would, when you play music, you would get it's the way that the instruments clash, and you sometimes get rogue sounds within a recording. If you're, good engineers will know how to get rid of those sounds. And we had it a couple of times where we had a sound which sounded literally like two sheets of metal being sort of scraped together. And it was a clash. What it was the guitars were, they were, because of the way that the frequencies work and the chord structure and all that, the way, and it was causing this kind of this audio phenomenon, recording it onto the tape. So we just changed the song slightly, and it went away, and they did some stuff, and it was fine. But it was really weird, because of course we're all in the studio going, yeah, it's a ghost, it's haunted, But then years later, I read that this, quite a well-known band, I'm really trying to think of their name, but they recorded an album, and they had these phantom voices or noises, and they left them on the album. They just mixed it in and just used it as part of the music, the tracks. So, I mean, also as well, I'm trying to think of the name of the film. It was an independent film. It was It was made maybe 10 years, 15 years ago.
Okay.
And it was when they came to do the edit, when they'd done all the filming and the film was done. It was all shot in black and white. And when they came to edit it together, they were going through it frame by frame, and so many frames of the film had faces and what looked like people that weren't in the cast, that were on that weren't in the film, and they couldn't
That is
understand
freaky.
where those faces come from. So how weird's that?
That is weird.
How does that work?
That
And
is
they have the pictures of these printed pictures from these frames. They didn't. It was just weird. So who knows?
Speaking of weird, I have this little story. You know, I've had a lot of weird stuff happen where I live, but the latest, and I mentioned it to Alex, is I have this old army chest. It's just a smart homemade army chest that I purchased years ago. I can't even remember where, and I just have some old DVDs placed in it, and have
Yeah.
some stuff in it. I don't know. Hold on, I can show you. Right,
Yeah,
where is
yeah.
it?
It's
Right
over there
down
in
there,
the
down
corner.
on the
Yeah.
bottom there. But anyways, I came in here one day, and inside it is something that Gareth and I would talk about all the time. And that is a TV series called Tomorrow People.
Oh, Tomorrow People. Yeah. Excellent series.
Yeah, amazing series. And
Yeah.
I had the part 1 and 2 box set inside that. And I came in here one day, and I'm looking at the desk, and there they are sitting on top of my desk here. And I'm like, okay, that's weird. Why are those sitting there? And I looked at the box where they normally are sitting in.
Yeah.
Everything on top was over to the floor beside it, and the latch had been open. There's a latch on it. And I'm asking my wife, I'm like, were you up here
Yeah.
looking? Did you put those there? And she's like, no, I haven't even been in this room. And I'm like,
Where did you get I mean, because that's kind of
where
you
did I?
think of the chest. Where did that come from? Did you
You
pick
know
it up,
what?
or
I bought it at a antique place years
do
ago.
you know the history of it?
I don't know anything about it. Nothing.
Okay, so one of my interests is I like to go around what you call, I suppose, thrift stores. We call them secondhand
I
shops.
love it. Yeah, me too.
Yeah, I just and I got this thing for buying things that seem to have like history, and I bought a pair of mugs, cups, whatever you call them, mugs, I suppose. And
Yeah.
when I got them home, I had this kind of, when you see something in one of those shops and you see it, and I want that, I'm going to
Yeah.
buy it.
Oh yeah,
And I bought
absolutely.
these two cups. They were handmade. Okay, they were like made of clay, and they'd been kiln baked and stuff, and glazed. And when I got them back to my home, I was washing them, and I turned them upside down, and on the bottom of them it was inscribed. So what? Right, the story I understand from reading them was these cups were made by hand,
Yeah.
and each cup was made for a husband and a wife. So they may have made themselves a cup each for each
Okay.
other, and then signed it on the bottom.
Oh.
And I just thought that was like very strange. Why I was attracted to those cups and why I bought them, and then I found this, and I thought, there's a story there. There's a history. This cup has got a story to tell,
Yeah.
which I only know a little bit of, and yet for some reason I went there and I bought it and I brought it back, and now I am the custodian of it. And when you look at all stuff when you go out and buy stuff that is pre-owned,
Mhm.
you buy the history with it. You buy you,
Absolutely, yeah.
and I think that's what's going back once again to, I live in the past, and I I kind of look at stuff and I think to myself, if someone buys something, I'm trying to think of the guy's name. He's got a YouTube channel. He used to have a podcast where
Mhm.
he would tell ghost stories and stuff, and he started a YouTube channel some time back, and he did a few videos, and one of the videos that he did was a paranormal group did a investigation at I think it was a church or a converted church. Anyway, there was some stuff going on, and they said that the root cause of the paranormal disturbances was a mirror which was made
Mhm.
from part of the wood of one of the window arches or something, but it was made into a mirror, and they'd wrapped it up and put it away and said that if you keep it away, it'll be fine. And he scoffed at this and thought, I'm going to do an experiment. I'll have it. I'll take it off your hands. And he brought it back to his apartment, and he
Mhm.
shows it on video. He says, "This is the mirror, and it's very grand. It's very big. It looks very nice." And he goes, "I'm going to unwrap it right now. It's been covered up since it's been back here." And he unwraps it. He said, "There you go. It's just a mirror. I'm going to leave it there now." And then maybe a week or so went by, and he made another video, and he started to say, um, he's getting. His phone's ringing. I think it's his phone. He gets phone call. No, it's someone's knocking at his door late at night. Somebody's tapping on his door,
That's
and
right.
yeah, and he goes to open his door. He lives in a complex, so he
Mhm.
thought it was somebody doing a prank in him, and he opened the door, and nobody there. And he closed the door, go back to bed, and there'd be tap 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 on the door, and he'd go open the door. There's nobody there, and he's in bed. Right now, this would this would have scared me. They He hears someone in his front room walking
Okay.
around. So he gets up, goes to the front room, there's no one there. He checks everything, nothing's been disturbed. He comes back to bed and he gets in bed, and his bed apparently is next to a window, right? And then someone just bangs on the window right next to him. And of course he opens the curtains, there's nothing there. His girlfriend starts to experience stuff, and it comes to the point where he comes into his front room and he sees a child in his front room for a fleeting moment,
Mhm.
and then they're gone. And at that point, he starts to connect that, hey, maybe there's something is going on here. Maybe I have brought something home. So
I
I
get
don't
that
know.
all the time. I
Yeah.
get it all the
So
time.
yeah. I
But
mean, who
well,
knows?
well, let me ask you. Hey, when you go to these thrift shops, these antique shops,
Exactly.
and you look at this stuff
You're buying
and
the
say,
history.
but yeah, what are we? Is this something that we want? Or is this
Um,
something we're asking for? Or is
I
this
think
something that we're totally oblivious to and, obviously having to pay the price later on when
yeah.
it does happen?
I think that when you go to these shops and you look at this stuff, that a lot of it is just it's just stuff, and
Yeah,
it doesn't hold any history. But
yeah.
there is stuff there that does have a story, and
Mm,
it's maybe it been in an environment which has been a sad story or an abusive story,
mm,
and in some way that object, it can be anything. I think it could be a plate, or it could be a cup, or it could be a pair of trainers. um, you know and in some way it becomes emotionally charged, and that when you grab those, whatever they are, because they're a bargain, and you bring them back, if you are the right kind of person that is sensitive, in the sense of, I don't mean like a psychic, I mean sensitive as in the sense of being able to pick up on a little bit more than what the average person picks up on. I think that in then you open up a doorway where you can perceive or let in, or um, I don't want to use, no, actually, no, I don't want to say the word let in because you knew what you're talking about, a portal to the nether world or anything like that. I think that you are the trigger. It's going back to when people are all together and they see a UFO. Are all of those people seeing the same thing? It's like when you have a group of people and they see an apparition. Not everyone sees the same thing. Somebody might see a full-bodied apparition, and somebody else might be slightly further away, but they go, "Well, I only saw half a person. They didn't have any legs." But they're seeing the same thing, but they're all not seeing the same thing. So something's happening between the mind, the brain, us, our perception, and it has a lot to do with individuals and how we perceive the environment around us. You know?
Oh man, it's there's one thing I love. When I build stuff, I love to build stuff, and I will use, instead of going out and buying fresh wood, I will use reclaimed wood.
Yeah.
I will go in and buy, like, say, for instance, barn board, or a board that's been reclaimed from some sort of structure, and use it and build it. It's just so amazing the amount of energy that these objects hold.
I
You
think
know?
when it comes to buildings and buildings that have been, I suppose, repurposed into, for example, the most classic case is a church.
Yeah.
When a church no longer has a congregation
Hmm.
and it becomes, not a church anymore, and someone comes along, a developer, and says, "I like this. I'm going to make it into my home."
Hmm.
Um, and I do know of a few around here that have been repurposed into homes, and they
Yeah.
look kind of cool, especially one of them because their front garden's still got all the graves in it. Um, but the thing is, it's like when you do that, I think that you're not changing the actual the environment that it is within. You are changing its appearance and you're changing its usage, but you're not changing anything else. Possibly when you do make change, that there is a chance that you can maybe excite anything that might be there.
Yeah.
People say, "Oh, I bought this 15th century building and it's been great for 10 years, and now I'm doing some work on it and I'm getting all this weird stuff." I find that fascinating. I think that, well, why would a ghost get angry if you're putting in a new kitchen? I'm thinking I had this see there's this thing where this train of thought where some people believe that when you die, you perceive the world as it was or as it is when you lived.
Mm.
So,
Yeah.
when we pop our clogs and go on to wherever we go, if we choose to hang around for a bit, we all perceive things as if, they, the way that we remember them
Hmm.
because we will make up our mind, we will make up our environment with the way that we remember things.
Yeah.
So, because we can't perceive anything that's beyond what we can understand at the point of when we didn't, when we don't live anymore. But there's the other train of thought to say that no, you're a free spirit and you can fly around and you can see everything and see the change of everything. I think that when you're in a building and we remember people lived and died their whole lives
Hmm.
in a building, and that was they were born in the house, they lived their whole life in the house, and they died in that house. I think in some way they become inherently connected to the building and
Yeah.
also that space, that bubble that they live in, because
Hmm.
back in people didn't travel very much in the olden days. They kind of stayed very close to home. You could only go as all right. People did go places. You got on a horse or you'd walk, but you didn't fly all around the world or anything like that. So
They didn't have a need to.
they didn't need to. It was
Yeah.
everything
Yeah.
was in
Exactly.
their little social bubble,
Yep.
and they didn't need to go far. And I think that when you spend that much time in one place, I think that you are going to be making your print. You are going to be leaving something behind when you are no longer there. And I think that we do get that with older buildings. I mean, there is somebody said to me a while back, we was on a conversation about ghosts and stuff, and they're saying, yeah, but why don't you get a ghost of a caveman? Why don't I see ghosts of cavemen? And I'm thinking, well, there is an answer for that, and well, a theory. I wouldn't say it was an answer. I would say that back in the very olden days, the dinosaur days.
Is this before the 80s?
Way before the 80s. Back when there was dinosaurs, there was just dinosaurs, and then the dinosaurs were gone, and then there was we came along, and maybe we came out of the trees and we started to do stuff and make communities and stuff. I think that there has to be a certain amount of I don't want to get all new agey and weird. I don't want to start tricking all these words out the air, but I'm going to use this word because it's the most relevant to what I'm trying to convey here quickly without me telling another story. So when you are a long time ago, maybe they weren't psychically evolved or enough to leave a print. And I do think that there are because paranormal phenomenon goes way back, and there's people a long time ago that there are accounts of ghosts and things and what they call devils and demons and the devil.
Our awareness wasn't there.
Yeah, but the thing is, it's like when you think about it, okay, so pretend that that you've lived you live in a house and you have a ghost, and the ghost every day walks on the landing, and you can watch that ghost every day. That ghost might do that for the next 250 years, but as the 250 years count down, that ghost gets fainter and fainter and fainter until you can no longer see that ghost, but you can hear that ghost. So there is a depletion in energy. It takes a long time, but there are cases out there where people have seen apparitions, and as the years go by, the apparition has become fainter and fainter until it's just an audible thing. They can hear it walking, but they can't see it. So that makes me kind of reason to myself, well, maybe there are olden day ghosts that are still doing their thing, but a lot of them have kind of expired like a battery. They've kind of run out, and they might still be around as in a sounds, but visually they're no longer around. And so what we're seeing now.
Good point, but don't you think? Okay, so since we're like, I like to think when we're dealing with this sort of realm as being like an energy imprint, and energy being infinite. Would that not constantly, like like we said, residual, constantly play out? And I like how you're saying it eventually wanes out.
Yeah. So okay. So I'll say it a different way. So basically, you have So you have two kind of hauntings, right? You have the residual haunting, which is just it's not conscious. It just does its thing, right? It just plays like a tape player, right? So that because it's not able to, it's not actually conscious, right? It's just doing its thing. And then you have an intelligent haunting, which is a personality or allegedly a personality, or it's a consciousness.
Responsive.
Yeah. So that way, if it's responsive, it must be at some point, if it's responsive and it's able to tap on the wall 3 times and it taps, or move stuff, or make things appear and disappear, or whatever, then it must be, to a certain point, it must be conscious of itself. And if it's conscious of itself, then it must be able to I'm not going to say feed on people because that makes it sound like a vampire, but in some way it is a little bit vampiretic because it's using energy to convey a message so that it can, do things like tap on the wall or whatever. Because one thing I don't ever understand is some people that say, well, you've got to do ghost hunting in the dark. I don't think you need to do any of that. I think that ghosts, if they're going to be ghosts and do ghost things, they do it whenever they want. You know, I think that the problem is that we're looking, when we look at the phenomenon and we look at hauntings and we look at ghosts, I think that you get a bit confused by people get a bit confused by, well, it's a ghost, so it's obviously grandma that's come back and she's a bit angry and you whatever, and it's kind of, maybe it's not grandma, maybe it's something we have no clue about, maybe we don't know. For example, Whitley Strieber, Communion, his his UFO weirdness in that cabin in the woods, when he had friends there, they complained that they were experiencing strange poltergeist phenomenon. Well, when you think about it, strange poltergeist phenomenon with people that have had UFO, I'll use that word, abduction experiences, they have a poltergeist phenomenon. Maybe, okay, I'm going to get really weird now. Maybe that's people that are visiting their homes who have got the ability that so that we don't see them.
Yep.
Maybe that's the poltergeist phenomenon. Maybe that's what they're experiencing. Maybe they, it's such a rabbit hole to go down when you start talking about this phenomenon. You go from one to the other, and you start to think, hang on, this seems all kind of connected. Bigfoot, Sasquatch, whatever you want to call him. There's a train of thought now that there is some sort of paranormal phenomenon connected to him, that he seems to be able to be in the forest and follow people around and be seen but never be caught.
Exactly.
But people experience him, and more than one at once, and yet they never are able to get near enough to, I mean, obviously, it's getting to a point now where, you get the stick knocking and the noises and the howling and the stone throwing, but nobody ever seems to be able to capture or, get near him. And there are people that have had, there are people that have had encounters with them. And also, one of the things that they do say is when they walk, they seem to almost glide when they walk. They like, for every step we take, we'd have to take like 10 steps for one of their 1 steps. It's as if they glide across the ground rather than walking across the ground. And for how big and massive they are, they're so silent. They don't hear any noise. So I think that all of this, that kind of phenomenon, the UFO phenomenon, the ghost phenomenon, there has to be a single connection to all of it, which will, if you could figure that out, I think that you would make a massive.
We would be millionaires.
Well, yeah, or billionaires.
There's a question in chat for Reeves from Della.
Yeah, sorry.
Yes. Della asks,
hello, Della.
Does he think, or do you think, some ghosts are split off parts of consciousness?
Yes, I do. I think that. All right. Okay. So I'll go into another tangent here because I do think this is possible. That if you pass on and if you die, possibly you would go into a kind of, I'm going to say a purgatory, but more like a limbo, and that limbo could possibly be like a very confused dream state, and that where you are not really fully aware of your environment and you're kind of half asleep, but you are kind of, your personality is there, but only parts of it, only certain parts of your personality. And this is what I was talking about earlier, where there are researchers out there that say that, is it possible for only parts of your personality to kind of live on, or if you die or get killed or suicide or something happens to you very quickly and you're suddenly no longer alive and you're very confused, you're in a confused state, and people say, well, maybe when you die you go to heaven and it's great. And I think a lot of heaven and hell is is in your head. And if you pass on and you're the kind of person to say, oh, it's all a load of old nonsense, then you're going to create your own reality. So maybe that will be your own hell. And if you're the kind of person that's got an open mind and says, well, maybe there is something, then you're going to go and, have a nice experience. So I don't know. I mean, possibly. And if it is, then it could possibly be something like a bad dream, but a kind of a bad dream that just keeps resetting itself over and over, and in just a massively confused state.
Reeves, we need to have you back on the show.
I've
absolutely I've absolutely enjoyed this.
Yep.
We would love to have you back on, man.
Good. Well, I will be back.
Oh, we would love to have you. Let everyone know about Paratalk.
Yes.
What's going on with Paratalk and where to find the episodes.
Paratalk, the best place to go is paratalkpodcast.com. I always post, every episode will be posted to the main website. From the main website as well, you can find a link to the RSS feeds, so that you can, wherever Spotify. If you go to Spotify or I've just been accepted onto Apple Podcasts. So if you go to any of those main ones like Spotify or Apple Podcast and put in the Paratalk podcast, you'll find me. There will be 2 Paratalk signs that are the same, but I've left the Gareth's one is there with me, and that's the archive, and then there's a new one, and that'll be the new episodes, but you'll just see my name, so you'll know that's just me, but you'll find it. So yeah, that's the best place, and from the main website you can get all of the links. And as for episodes, at the moment I'm still finding my feet. I've got lots of ideas, and I'm going to be arranging some guests to come on and just do like we're doing, just an hour or so of just free chat and just talk about things. But I also want to do the little mini episodes of just cases, because I do enjoy doing those. I do enjoy narrating them and doing the research.
And they're great. I absolutely love them, man. You're doing a wonderful job. You're doing a great job, and I commend you. Keep them up.
Good. And yes,
really
and thank you for having me on, because it's been a laugh.
It's been a long time in the works. Like I said, Gareth kept saying you got to have Reeves on, and thankfully we finally had you on. And you know what? We would love to have you back, Reeves.
Yes, I'll be back. No worries about that.
Awesome.
Good.
Take care, and thank you, my friend.
You're welcome.
Take care, Reeves.
Cheers.
Amazing. I'm so happy to have Reeves back. Well, not back on, but on for the very first time. Yep. Wow. Great show, man.
Yeah, it was.
Great show.
He has a lot of information. We definitely got to have him back on, because I know he could have had more stories.
Yeah. Hey, love to have him back. I think we need to sort of say maybe we need to reserve dark discussions just for Reeves now.
Yeah.
It was amazing. Thank you, Reeves. Really appreciate it. And guys, check out Paratalk, the podcast. Really good. Check the archives out with him and Gareth. Great show. And like I said, Reeves is doing a wonderful job. Since he's brought it back, the 4 episodes, been great. Until next weekend, next Sunday night.
Yep.
Take care, everyone.
Have a good night, everyone.